Hello, welcome to The Revealing. I am once again your host, Pavoratii, here to bring you information on the Idaho 4 case. Now, as always, as a disclaimer, this channel is for entertainment purposes only. These are my opinions, not here to slander anyone. And with that being said, let's get started. Okay, so today, I want to discuss a few different topics. One major topic is the video I put out a couple of days ago, and the reason I put that video out. That video was my test to the Idaho 4 community and the other content creators out there to see what their reaction would be to an actual lead. And to say the least, it's been a mixed reaction. And I've learned several things from it. Now, first of all, let me send a shout out to Harsh. Harsh did a very nice video on me, and I appreciate you, Harsh. Harsh has always been one of my favorites. I've said that in previous videos. I like Harsh mainly for his personality that he brings to this topic. It's not usual to have somebody that actually has personality when talking about the Idaho 4 case, and Harsh definitely has it. He also has good information. So now I know Harsh has taken that video down that he did on me, and that's okay. No hard feelings. I'm not going to get mad at Harsh. Now, as far as other content creators out there, there's several of them that I watch consistently that I think are very good. I've mentioned some of them in my previous videos. Open Mind Perspectives, Law Offices of Andrew Myers, Forensic Frenzy. I like A.R. Hayes, and who am I? Oh, Unfiltered Lucky. Got the great questions. And those are a lot of the ones that I watch consistently. But obviously, to be on top of this case, you have to keep your eyes open. So I watch a lot of the other content creators out there. If I haven't mentioned some of them that I watch, I'm sorry. Now, some of them had some rather, let's say, different reactions to my content. And that was what I was really hoping to accomplish. Because we hear this term out there a lot. Critical thinking. I'm doing a lot of critical thinking on things. Well, I wanted to see who was really capable of critical thinking, and I also wanted to see who wasn't. And let me give you some examples of some of these content creators and the content that they consistently put out there. One of the examples would be the Frat Boys. Okay, I see a lot of videos out there suggesting the Frat Boys did it. Well, folks, let me tell you, I went to college and I had several opportunities to actually get into fights with frat boys. And you know what happened after the fights? Nothing. None of them ever followed me back to my dorm room or my apartment and attempted to slay me and all of my friends. In fact, what happens after frat boys get into a fight, because there's usually alcohol involved, is they talk about it quite a bit until the next day, and then they don't bring it up again because it's over. And that's what happens. They don't go and unalive 4 individuals. And I hear a lot of content put out about the 4 people running in the background of the Banfield video. Okay, well, take a look at what was going on in that Banfield video. You had law enforcement stopping youngsters that was out that had been drinking and were questioning them. And in the background, you see 4 other youngsters that was out probably drinking, seeing other youngsters getting interrogated by law enforcement. And what did they do? They took off running. Because that's what they do. Hey, let's see if we can get to the frat house before these cops get to us. Okay, now that's critical thinking. That's using common sense. Not, oh, they're running away from that house where the atrocities happened. They must have done them. Oh, goodness. Then other content, let's take a look here. They like to talk about the victim's boyfriends. Okay? Talk about slandering some people you don't need to slander. The victim's boyfriends, I'm sure, are going through a lot of pain in this atrocity that happened to their girlfriend and friends. I mean, I can't even imagine. And to suggest they had something to do with it when law enforcement clearly cleared them, law enforcement's not going to clear them if they feel like they may be involved in the case. I don't care if they're crooked or not, okay? But for law enforcement to clear them, that should be enough for everyone, even if you don't believe the law enforcement most of the time. Because these are kids involved with these other kids that this terrible thing happened to. So to keep suggesting they had something to do with it, now I would consider that slandering folks and bringing up scenarios that we probably shouldn't bring up, as was suggested about my video. Then we have the cult of Odin. Let's not even going to address that one. Stupid. Let's see here. Oh yeah, the roommates' involvement. Now, I've stated in many of my videos that I believe the roommates had absolutely no involvement in the atrocity. A lot of people think they did, and if you think they did, then you're entitled to your own opinion. I don't think they did. And I think content creators, though, as far as slandering some individuals, I mean, that would be a clear case of it. Individuals that they really can't find any logical ties to this atrocity other than the fact that they didn't dial 911 in a certain period of time. That is suspicious. Other than that, that's it. It's just suspicious. And then my favorite, Emma Bailey and Demetrius. People have tried to tie Emma Bailey to Jesse James Bailey, who was a prison guard who was part of a drug trafficking ring out of prison. I doubt he was too involved in that drug trafficking ring since he was working at the prison. And I have friends who are currently prison guards and former prison guards who tell me that it would be rather difficult to have too much involvement in a drug trafficking organization as a prison guard with all of the time that's taken up doing that. However, they will tie this case to that case, even though that case was nowhere near Latah County. And the Emma B. and Demetrius scenario I've explained in the past, there's nothing to suggest they could be involved in this because they're too low level. I've looked at the charges of Mr. Demetrius. They're petty crimes. Now, he did have a charge where he delivered a F pill to a kid and he died. That's serious, but it's very hard to convict on that charge. Now, their legislature is trying to change the laws to make that something that they really can convict you on, but they're not there yet. So the other low-level activities of this guy, I've seen nothing that shows me that he dealt in any type of volume, in my opinion, eliminates them from this scenario. And I know a lot of you thought I was talking about them in my last video, and I was not. And I'll explain why here in just a minute. But let's talk about real critical thinking, okay? Let's talk about actual common sense when looking at this case. Let's go back to the beginning. And if you can do this, I would sure like for you to. I'd like for you to eliminate everything you know about this case for just the next 2 to 3 minutes. And let me explain something to you and then see if it's easier for you to grasp. You have a house on 3 different levels with 2 bedrooms on each level. There's a roommate downstairs and an empty room. On the 2nd floor, there's a roommate in a room, and then you have another roommate in a room with her boyfriend staying over for the night. Then you go to the 3rd floor, you have a room that has a dog in it, and the former resident of that room that should be in there with that dog is actually visiting in town that night, and for some reason she's sleeping in the room to the right with the other roommate that lives there. Somebody comes in, doesn't harm the roommate downstairs, the second roommate upstairs, or the dog in the room on the third floor. They specifically go into one bedroom on the third floor, one bedroom on the second floor, and eliminate the individuals in there. Looking at it from that perspective, anybody with eyes to see and ears to hear would know that the two targets in this house were those two specific rooms. And if those two specific rooms were the target, who resides in those rooms? I don't like to use names, but we know who resides in those rooms, don't we? So the gentleman who was spending the night with his girlfriend didn't live there. Obviously, if the rooms were targeted, they didn't expect him to be there. Or even if they did, they didn't care if he was there or not. He wasn't the target, the other one was. They went upstairs. And even if the young lady that didn't live there anymore was staying there that night, they would have expected her to be in her bedroom with her dog. She wasn't. She was in the room with the other target. So they were all eliminated. Once we establish that, and that's the only commonsensical way to establish that, then we have to figure out why it happened. What do we do to figure out why it happened? Well, let's first of all look in the area. Is there any major investigations currently going on in this area? Oh, there is a 4-county drug task force operating in the area. What does that tell us? That there are a lot of drugs, a lot of drug activity going on in this area, or else there would not be a drug task force. Not every area has them, only areas where they're trying to impact drugs. And whenever there's an area with a lot of drugs, things like this happen. So the next logical step would be, do those individuals have any ties to drugs? Looking into their past, can't find any. And I know there's been a lot of speculation that the house was a drug house and maybe was storing drugs. There's nothing that's been verified as it relates to that. It's all speculation. Those two girls had no history of drugs that we know of. So then we go to the next step. Does anybody close to them have a history with drugs? Oh my goodness. One of their mothers and the other one, the mother, stepmother, and the father, both. Okay, well, has anything happened recently with their drug offenses? Oh my goodness. They both had their charges set to come due a few days before this atrocity happened. Oh my goodness, let's look deeper into those charges. Were they actually going to be charged with what they were originally charged with? No, both of the charges had been reduced, even though they had prior convictions. Okay, now the scenario should be clear. They talked, they set somebody up, upper level, and upper level had to send a message. Now, how does upper level send a message? They send the pro out, or the pros. So let's assume that is what happened in this case. They send the pros out to take care of it. Now, how would law enforcement be able to get those pros in a short period of time? Because they didn't have enough time to complete IGG investigations. They couldn't match up DNA on a knife sheath to anybody in their database. It takes time to get back phone records and track down vehicles on cameras. No, they were on to this gentleman early on in the investigation that we found out. And the only way that they could do that is if they had an informant or informants. Now, I've noticed that other content creators who have speculated on my video have suggested the more likely informant would be like the DoorDash driver. Read the documents. They state that these informants' lives may be in danger if their identity becomes known. Who would hurt the DoorDash driver? The YouTube true crime community? The never kohbergers? they would go out and harm this DoorDash driver because they thought he was a witness? Do you really believe the courts and law enforcement believe that? No, this informant is somebody that could be harmed by real people, people in upper level drug trafficking, because what happens to informants in drug trafficking? They are eliminated consistently. It is a rule of the street, and I know you've heard this. So sometimes I listen to these content creators who continue to put out the ridiculous content, and it makes me think, are they truly capable of critical thinking, or maybe has somebody gotten to them and they're only allowed to discuss certain aspects and issues on this case, being the ridiculousness? And that is a possibility, because although nobody's gotten to me yet, I feel like it's coming. And I feel that way because if you go back and look at my videos, go ahead and pull up the comments. I can see them very easily. I don't know if you can or not. Let's see if you can. But as you read through my comments, there will be some that are different than the rest. And they're not short comments, they're extended comments. And they're written in a very specific way, meant to put you in a different direction. They're meant to deter you, to steer you. And I know them when I read them, and I can identify them fairly easily. And if you don't think there is a team somewhere sitting, working the comments in the Idaho 4 case to try to steer the information, well, then you're fooling yourself. Now take a look at this for just a minute. And if you don't have enough time to read it, as always, it's okay. When it's done, I'm going to read it for you. Okay, we'll come back to what I had just shown you here in just a minute. So again, the purpose of this video was to put a test out there to see what they would do with a real lead. And let me explain how you come up with a real lead. For a long time, I was waiting to really dive into this informant, okay? I used those Steve G leaked texts about 2 weeks ago to dive in really, really hard on the subject. And I really wanted it to hit home, and I believe I did, because I wanted other content creators out there to follow my lead and bring it up and discuss it, and they did. I knew by doing that, it would stir the pot. It would shake the beehive, and it would also pucker up law enforcement in that area to get the informants protected, because they really are in danger. And the way that law enforcement protects informants, you may not understand this, but the best way to protect a criminal informant is by faking charges, arresting them, and putting them in protective custody in the county jail. And you bet they would rather be in protective custody in the county jail than out on the street with real heat on them, because that's about the only place they can really protect them. Now, I believe I did that, and I had been watching the Latah County arrest tickets for the last couple of weeks to see if I could identify a likely informant. And a couple of days ago, I did. And then as I dug in deeper, I went back to the dates of the crime, the atrocity, to see if they had any arrest dates that correlated. And oh, you betcha they did. And all the other red flags that popped up. And if you watched my last video, you know what red flags I'm talking about. And if you want to dig into it deeper, go watch that video again and then really dig into it, because I didn't put out all the information that I had on those individuals. I just put out enough for people that wanted to go start researching themselves. And by doing that, though, I wanted to see the reaction from the Idaho 4 content creators so I could see who was real and who wasn't. And one of the content creators had some interesting words to say about my content and how it may be reckless, and it didn't look like it really involved this case. And their justification of it was those people with those charges, the criminal justice system just lets off all the time. That's how our criminal justice system works. And then they went as far as to equate it with domestic violence charges and why people that should be in jail on domestic violence charges weren't. Okay, so what I showed you a minute ago were Idaho statutes. And it was on number 1, domestic violence. And the second one was on drug trafficking. Okay, these are the Idaho statutes. And where do the laws in Idaho? These aren't federal laws, these are Idaho laws. Where do they come from? There's a legislature that everybody votes for that actually goes in and creates laws, votes on them, and puts them into practice. So these are laws from the legislature. The court has to follow the laws from the legislature. All right, that's how our whole justice system works, how America works. It's called democracy, constitutional republic, really. But when you look at domestic violence charges in Idaho, charge number 1, up to 6 months in jail, up to a $1,000 fine. Charge number 3, up to 5 years in prison, up to a $5,000 fine. No minimums. That means even on charge number 3, the judge can put you on probation because there's no minimum requirements. He can give you up to 5 years. Typically they don't. He can give you 6 months. You'll be out in 2 on parole. All right, that's how domestic violence is looked at in the state of Idaho. Now, I'm not saying that that's right. I think domestic violence is terrible. I think the laws should be way more harsh on individuals that commit that offense. But the legislature sure doesn't think so, and you have to go by what the legislature thinks, or you have to vote in different people in the legislature. That's how it works. Now let's look at the drug trafficking charges, though, that I'm discussing in this case. And if you were able to read that, you would see that first offense, drug trafficking for METH, over 400 grams, which is a little less than a pound. These folks had 1.5 pounds on them and were charged with drug trafficking. First offense, drug trafficking for METH, over 400 grams, minimum sentence 10 years, maximum sentence life. You know what a minimum sentence is, folks? That's the lowest amount a judge can sentence them for if convicted on that crime. They can't say, I'll just give you a year on this one. They do not have the power to do that. The legislature does. And what the legislature specifies, the judge has to follow. Minimum sentence, first time offense, drug trafficking, 10 years in Idaho. Second offense for drug trafficking in Idaho, take the first offense and double it. 20-year minimum sentence, maximum sentence, life in prison. So when you see somebody get probation for that charge, or you see somebody get a year for 2 of those charges, well, then there's something rotten in Denmark, ladies and gentlemen. And if you take those individuals, cross-reference them with the dates of the atrocity, you're going to see how easy it is to find their involvement in the Idaho 4 case. And their involvement may be much greater. But with that being said, I wanted to get this video out there. Once again, thank you for those of you that have liked and subscribed to my channel. I appreciate it. I look forward to hearing your comments. Give me all your criticisms because those are my favorite. And until next time, Pavoratii is out.